Namaste. Omnipotence is an important idea in psychoanalysis. However, over years, it has come out to be a far more pervasive than we originally believed. Hence, a discussion and reassessment is called for. And for that, we have with us psychoanalysis consultant Christine Manchurai. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
So, what has been the history of omnipotence in psychoanalysis?
The concept of omnipotence in psychoanalysis is very old. In fact, Freud discovered it very early when he talked about the state of primary narcissism and the grandiosity of the baby. His Excellency the baby, or something to that effect, Freud used to say, to denote the omnipotence showed by the baby. And that creates a kind of a background that omnipotence is inbuilt in human beings. It is an inescapable developmental fact. It's also an inescapable human fact. So, narcissism in a generic sense is generic to all human beings. And omnipotence also is. So, the history goes back to a very early days of psychoanalysis when this thing was discovered. The omnipotence was discovered by Freud, and then Klein also came to know about it when there was this addiction of the ecstasy of the good breast. So in the paranoid schizoid phase, when the all good breast was experienced, or even the all bad breast was experienced, it was experienced as an omnipotent entity. At times omnipotent all good, at times omnipotent all bad. And omnipotent all good would lead to ecstasy, and omnipotent all bad would lead to terror and paranoia. But the concept of omnipotence was definitely there, that the child fantasized of omnipotent good objects and omnipotent bad objects. And this also led to the whole series of ideas on object loss. The object loss was so difficult because it was loss of an omnipotent object, especially omnipotent good object. So Klein took it up, and after Klein, Kohut took it up. And in Kohut, we see the grandiosity and the omnipotence which is in search of, the child is in search of, and child wants to live as an inescapable part of everyone's development. And if we are denied the ability to live that omnipotent part out, it can produce, not always does, but can produce extreme forms of shame and inferiority. And in many cases, I am not good enough may be rooted in that part of our early development. So we had a line of the classical line from Freud to Klein to Kohut, and then we had other thinkers who were specializing in narcissism, who also found omnipotence to be a very important concept in psychoanalysis, be it Kernberg or be it Malvin or other thinkers who went deeper into the narcissistic part of it. Carl Jung took a slightly parallel but separate line where the quest to be far more than what we actually are, individuation being motivated by concerns which are not ordinary, which are extremely extraordinary, and the omnipotent mythological realm informing us, motivating us, and also representing our inner grandiosity. That came together to uh, conceptualize omnipotence in slightly different terms. But all four of them and many others have come to realize that omnipotence, and in a generic sense, narcissism, I'm not talking about diagnostically pathological narcissism, but omnipotence and narcissism in generic sense are as generic to us as is the quest for pleasure and the instinct for aggression.
So is it fair to say that omnipotence is only found in narcissistic personalities?
No, it is found in everyone in different measures. It is out of control in narcissistic personalities. And it is out of control but not florid in a more subtle way in other personality disorders, where it is not florid, it does not ooze out as a fountain as it does in narcissistic personality disorder, but in a hidden way, right? It is still beyond the line of the normal in other personality disorders, because when we go deeper, we do realize that omnipotence, either by assuming omnipotence or by de-idealizing oneself in form of in face of omnipotence, but omnipotence as a concept, as a psychological fact, as a psychological player, is definitely important in all personality disorders. Omnipotence is also very important in other personality disorders. For example, say paranoid personality disorder, where delusion of paranoia, let us say, where one is terrified of being attacked because the attack is coming from an omnipotent person, or in extreme forms of phobia, where the phobic object is assumed to be omnipotent. So omnipotence as a concept you can find in variety of chapters of DSM, where this concept makes its appearance and a critical player of that whole constellation.
Sir, how do we see the manifestation of omnipotence in everyday life? A few examples if you can share.
We are not satisfied with our everyday routine, and all of us want to do something extraordinary. All of us have a quest for greatness and fame, and all of us are in search of omnipotence either inside of us or outside. The outside may be an ideology, maybe a nation state, maybe God, or maybe a political leader, or maybe just a celebrity. But the quest of omnipotence does not go away. You can see that in arts, how characters are created who are omnipotent. Best character would be James Bond in movies. We all know no man can do what he does, but yet we repeatedly pay money to see it, knowing fully well it's untrue. Because the quest for omnipotence in us makes us identify and live our omnipotence through him, because in real life we cannot live our omnipotence. And that's how we see all the surreal characters in art and movies and folklore and literature. They are so larger than life, and nobody is interested in realistic characters. So we see it in art, we see it in movies, we see it in celebrities, the celebrity worship, the hero worship. We see it in how people respond to political leaders, sports leaders, and so on. We also realize firsthand how intoxicating it is to go even near to greatness and fame, to even meet somebody who is supposed to be living greatness and fame, or that when we do something extraordinary and greatness and fame even in small proportions comes to us, how intoxicating it is. It tells us how deeply we want it and how satisfying it is. So the everyday life is full of the statement that we are not content with every day. We are not content with the real. We want the surreal. Essentially, real is only a necessary evil. Our real life of desire is only in the surreal, and there one of the central desires we have in the surreal is the desire to be omnipotent and to experience omnipotence in a variety of ways, directly or vicariously by identification. So we see the intense acute desire for omnipotence and the desperation to fulfill that desire and the ecstatic satisfaction that comes from satisfaction of that desire all around us.
So how do you account for genesis of omnipotence in psychoanalysis?
The genesis is inborn. Nobody teaches us to be omnipotent. Instinctually, the feeling of omnipotence, the search for omnipotence, and the drive to experience omnipotence, all of them are inborn. In early life, in very early life, we experience the omnipotence ecstasy of primary narcissism. And once the object life starts, we experience the ecstasy and the splendor of the all good breast, and also the terror of the all bad breast. So it is inborn, and the question is, why should nature keep it in us? Obviously, if nature wants us to do something in this world and work hard and ensure so much of progress on this planet, a variety of motivations are needed. And one of the many motivations that nature has put in us is this quest of omnipotence. That individually and collectively as a race, there is no way we can give up our quest and our search and our love for omnipotence. So whether it is history or culture or science or philosophy or spirituality, omnipotence guides us, motivates us in all areas of life. So it's a great motivation and power generator, a great desire generator. So it is kept in us by nature to fulfill its own program, but as individuals, we find it very intoxicating and overwhelming as a motivation, and very hidden and subtle. It's not easy to make out.
Sir, in which pathology do we see manifestation of omnipotence the strongest?
Strongest we see in narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah.
Second strongest we see is in covert narcissism, which according to DSM is not so much of a pathology, but we know psychoanalytically it is so. Then we look at other personality disorders and we see omnipotence hidden as a concept. When we go deeper, it comes out. So in histrionicity also, we see hidden workings of omnipotence. In avoidant personality disorder also, we see the hidden working in the sense it's projected on somebody else and the self is de-idealized. So this is so highest in narcissism, most overt and florid, then in other personality disorders, and then in a variety of conditions. In phobia, when it's extreme, it's because its omnipotence is projected onto the phobic object. In panic, it's projected on some catastrophic event which is going to happen. In delusion or paranoia, projected on the person or the entity that somebody believes is going to attack. Or say, for example, delusion of thought control. It's projected on somebody that that person or that machine has omnipotence and can control my thoughts. And often it happens that in addiction, omnipotence is often projected on the substance, or one tries through the substance to experience the ecstasy of being with the omnipotent all good object. So in variety of ways, at times the omnipotence comes into play in the form that it's projected on something that we fear. At times we identify with omnipotence and we become narcissistic. At times uh, we try to experience omnipotence, the splendor and the ecstasy of it through a substance in addiction. So in a variety of ways, omnipotence as an entity is a very important player in a variety of psychological problems and in conceptualization, not only in conceptualization, even in experience. It's a very, very important player. It is just that it's not appreciated, understood, or used enough.
Right. So how does psychotherapy heal omnipotence?
The first is the discovery, making the unconscious conscious. The fact that somebody has a quest for omnipotence or somebody feels addictively the ecstasy of some omnipotent object. It may be a human being or it may be a situation or it may be a substance. Or somebody's unlived omnipotence where one is stuck. For example, if somebody comes with a narcissistic personality disorder, the insight may not be there that one has grandiosity. Or somebody comes with an extreme phobia, the insight may not be there that omnipotence is being projected on some bad object. Or put in another way, on an innocent object, you put omnipotence and badness together. So that innocent object becomes a terrifying object. So this first is the insight that omnipotence is at work. And then there are two different ways of it. Once omnipotence is observed, understood, conceptually integrated in awareness, then there are two problems. One is two parts. One is reality acceptance. That the quest of omnipotence cannot be fulfilled completely. So there is reality acceptance in a very profound sense and mourning of the desire which cannot be fulfilled. So it is reality acceptance and mourning. That is one path. And the second path is the fulfillment of certain desires, which is a more Pahushian path. That unless that deep-seated grandiosity of very early life is not lived through, the more you try to interpret, the more repressed it becomes. And unless it is lived through, the movement from a position of grandiosity to realism, that natural movement does not happen. So in that Pahushian way, we allow the person to live out the grandiosity so that after the desire is exhausted in a self-object relationship or in a twinship relationship with the therapist, the movement from a grandiose position to a realistic position can happen. So these are the two primary ways. The third way is where there is an addiction of the all good breast or the terror of the all bad breast. There we have to explore deeper the terror and the ecstasy. So on one hand, you have the ecstasy and the splendor and the dazzle of the splendor. On the other hand, you have the terror of the attack, a brutal, annihilating attack. So one has to be with them, spend quite some time analyzing, articulating, feeling, looking at alternative scenarios, understanding the whole thing, where catharsis is important, doing it, where action is important, doing it, and coming back for analysis to look at the same thing. And in that way, slowly the issue gets addressed. It's not an easy issue to address, but it does get addressed over a period of time. And one may be able to be completely out of it, or one may substantially heal it. But without doubt, one goes out of the healing process far better than what he came in as.
So, sir, what are the difficulties that one faces in healing of omnipotence?
Uh, First is the addiction of ecstasy is so high that one just does not want to give it up. And if one does not give up the ecstasy of that ecstasy and the splendor of that omnipotent good object, the other part, the terror also remains because the split remains open. So the ecstasy may not allow the person to give up that position, the pathological position, and go towards a healing position. Second can be uh, the person did not have adequate good experiences in early life. And therefore, the person fears that if he tries to bring the two together, nothing of the good will remain because the bad is so overwhelming that there is 10 kg of good and 100 kg of bad. And even if 10 kg of good neutralizes 20 kg of bad, I will still be left with 70 kg of bad and no good if I bring it together. That's a oversimplified way of putting it. So too less of good experiences in early life can create this situation where no matter how hard you try, the person just can't give up the omnipotence because system won't allow it. So how to open up that part and allow the person to internalize some good experiences, and only then the bridging of the split can be possible. So then we are into an area of how to make sure good experiences are experienced and internalized. The third can be of envy, that because of envy of the goodness, one is not able to internalize goodness and proceed further. One keeps attacking it all the time. So the attack, if it's too much, again it depletes the good and creates the bad to be over dominant. That's the third. Fourth is one may not be able to go deep enough and be free enough to experience the early life grandiosity because it may appear very embarrassing or shameful to do it. So when one takes the Cohusian path, the person has to be free enough to experience the early life grandiosity without any diffidence. So these are some of the factors. And the fifth is very importantly, at times, there is a combination of high fragility and a strong regression to primary narcissism.
High fragility of ego.
A high fragility of ego and a strong but partial regression to early narcissism. And this combination usually gets people into either being on the borderline of psychosis or into psychosis, but very harmless, that they are not harmful to anybody, but they are withdrawn. They are not with what we call negative symptoms of psychosis. But there is a partial negative, there are partial negative symptoms of psychosis, but harmless. At times circumscribed, at times universal. But the difficulty there is the person in the regressed part of his personality is feeling the ecstasy of primary narcissism, of that omnipotence. And in that person, what has happened is the quest for omnipotence has been so badly frustrated and it becomes so unbearable for the person that the person has regressed to psychosis because the omnipotence could not be lived out and it was unbearable to see it frustrated. And now he is living out generally as a dependent on other family members, but very happy into oneself. So this category of group of clients are very happy, very happy, very happy, but they are like a happy child. They can't function in the world, and they don't want to function in the world. And the difficulty there is, if you allow them to be what they are, no progress happens. And if you try to heal them by making the discussion even slightly focused, the fragility is so high that it becomes unbearable, both in terms of the difficult material inside and the inability to let go of that ecstasy, what I call the bliss at the breast, the position to which the man has regressed, and they drop out of therapy. So these are some of the difficulties of trying to heal omnipotence in therapy.
So are there any positive manifestation of omnipotence?
Many,
No?
many of them.
Uh-huh.
Like omnipotence can lead to difficult things and also many good things.
The brighter side then.
Yeah, yeah. Carl Jung used to say, to be normal is the ideal aim of the unsuccessful. So whenever we want to do anything extraordinary in life, we take a risk. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to art, when it comes to political revolutions, historical revolutions, paradigm shifts in the intellectual area, risky things like going into space or mountain trekking or scuba diving or exploring the frontiers in North Pole or South Pole. All of these non-normal tasks, high-risk tasks, high optimism requiring tasks, extraordinary tasks, they require a heavy dose of omnipotence in the unconscious mind, with a heavy dose of positive experiences of the positive omnipotent object to really enable a person take up and accomplish such tasks. So the entire area of creativity is full of omnipotence. If you look at public art, commercial art is full of omnipotence everywhere. And it is because of the omnipotence often we are able to stretch ourselves beyond our limits and accomplish the almost impossible tasks.
I think why just that, sir? Even entrepreneurs, to some extent there is omnipotence presence in there.
Behind every ambition, behind
Yes.
non-ordinary, there is some degree of omnipotence.
And sir, how does spirituality consider this concept of omnipotence?
Spirituality takes to it in a very liberal and accommodative way, not as a pathological entity. So, for many spiritual systems, omnipotence is actually a goal. Not omnipotence in the outside world, but omnipotence in the inside world. In the sense, like an omnipotent insider, or let me put it better, like an omnipotent citizen of the inside world. One is able to conquer all the desires. And this goal of spirituality has an element of omnipotence in the inner world, limited omnipotence, but still omnipotence in the inner world by normal standards built into it. Spirituality also talks about rare experiences where one feels one with existence, and that gives an omnipotent feeling. Spirituality also talks about powers, which takes you near to omnipotence, and that is a quest for many spiritual aspirants. Spirituality also talks about the fact that this omnipotence is not for nothing. It is there because essentially the soul comes from some source which is omnipotent, and the soul has carried memories of the past, of the ground from where it has emerged, because the ground of the soul was omnipotent. And the soul carries memories of it and wants again to go back to that state. And spirituality also talks about how evolution is designed. The program of universe is designed. And this is towards some omnipotent goal. Not omnipotent in absolute sense, but in a limited sense. And it is because of all these reasons that the element of omnipotence is so important, significant, and inspiring in human nature.
Well, it was such a pleasure, sir, talking to you about this esoteric subject and getting your views as always. Thank you very much for this talk, sir. Our viewers can write to us at hvindia@gmail.com. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.